Good evening, everybody. Marty Richards with Richland Center Tourism here with your Wednesday night edition of Why Do We Call It That? Yes, I made you wait a long time today for it, but today's is a good one. For those of you not from the area, you're going to get a real history lesson here and learn a lot about some of the development of Richland County. For those of us that are my age, this will really fill in some gaps because I learned a lot researching this one that I simply didn't know. So tonight's Why Do We Call It That episode finds me standing in front of the A.V. Miller Memorial Building. Now for years, I've been aware of this building. It is located on the Richland County Fairgrounds property. It's been an important building for many years. During the fair, there were always many commercial displays here. More than once, I know that the dairy producers would have ice cream cones year to year to year. So it was a pretty popular place to go, for me anyway, in my formative years. So A.V. Miller, who was A.V. Miller? Well, A. Vernon Miller was born in Ohio. We don't know a lot or really haven't researched back too far to understand his formative years. But essentially what happened, he went to college in Ohio and then came to the University of Wisconsin at one point for part of his education. And through that process, he became a teacher. In that, he taught up north for just a couple years. And then early on in his career, he settled at Richland Center, and he started to teach in Richland Center at the high school. One thing that's not real well known, that we don't have a lot of information about, but we did find that in 1919, there is a record that shows that A.V. Miller took the Richland Center basketball team to the state tournament, and that was played in Ashland, Wisconsin at the time. I think they tried to find a place as far away as they could, and they did a good job of it. But A.V. Miller did take the Richland Center basketball team to the state tournament in 1919. Well, that's really a side note. A.V. Miller's fame, or what he was best known for, isn't going to come from athletic prowess. What A.V. Miller did for Richland County is really fantastic. We owe him a debt of gratitude over the years. So a couple of the things he did. Number one, he started some of the first agriculture education classes, first in school, and then really the very first ones where they did ag education for existing farmers and for city boys alike. I saw that quote in there that even city boys were attending his classes. Well, we move along a little bit, and in 1933 there was a federal grant. Now think about that time. In the 30s, we were just in the height of the Depression. Franklin Delano Roosevelt became president, inherited that situation, and in 1933 there was a federal grant to hire ag extension agents, so agriculture extension agents. For those of us who grew up in Richland County, maybe we were in 4-H, showed cattle, this was all just automatic. We thought this always existed. Well, there wasn't an ag extension agent prior to 1935. In 1935, Richland Center, or rather Richland County, hired A.V. Miller as its very first ag extension agent for a whopping salary of $2,000 a year. And then also, but hey, that wasn't it, there's more. He got $700 for travel expenses, and he had to travel the whole county. So A.V. Miller was really good at what he did, though. There's a lot of talk about some of the progressive ideas he had. He talked the Richland Center High School at the time into purchasing a corn moisture tester, which today we wouldn't farm without one, quite honestly. He also did a lot of work in erosion control and started some of the very first understanding of how to grow quality alfalfa. Again, with all of the things I've just said, we still aren't on to maybe the one thing that was the most important that A.V. Miller did. Well, back in 1933, our electrification throughout the county was really hit and miss. If you lived in Richland Center, you had electricity in your home. In some areas out in the county, you did have electricity as well. It just depended on how close you lived to a dam, basically. So if you lived down in the southern part of the county by the Balmoral Dam, which no longer exists, you might have had electricity there. Up by Yuba, they had some electricity, the Pine River. allowed for that. Ithaca, I know that there was some electricity there as well. Well, in 1935, the Rural Electrification Act went through. FDR signed that, encouraged that. Well, as soon as that started to happen out in these rural areas, they started to put electricity out into the rural areas so that farmers could milk more cows, farms could expand, things like that. Well, of course, when that starts to happen, and all of a sudden farmers gather together and they start creating co-ops to do that, the private companies that had been operating said, wait a minute, we thought that was our money to collect down the road. And so Wisconsin Power and Light actually started being very aggressive in trying to lay out electrical lines and planning things like that, throughout the county. Well, there was a group of farmers and a group of people. A.V. Miller was part of this leadership that said, we'll hold the phone. I think we really should kind of stake this out on our own. And they decided, we're going to go talk to the farmers, see if we could actually form our own cooperative to bring electricity and have more local control over that item. Subsequently, they did. They agreed to form the Richland Electric Cooperative, which still exists today and really has done a great job in many areas, not just electricity, but broadband supplying and other things like that. Well, of course, when they formed the cooperative, Wisconsin Power and Light didn't like that very much, and Richland County actually became the battleground between cooperatives and private entities of supplying power to the rural area. This went on for several months, and it was A.V. Miller that basically went to the farmers in the area and said, listen, Wisconsin Power and Light, I know they're trying to scare you. One of the things they did say, it was noted at the time, was that if this electrical entity that you're forming goes bankrupt, you will be responsible as a farm. You'll have to mortgage your farm to pay off the debts of that cooperative. A.V. Miller came along and said, hey, listen, that's not true, number one, but number two, we're going to succeed, and you're going to be glad that we did it. That truly was one of the greatest accomplishments that A.V. Miller made here in Richland County. He really did set the course for the Richland Electric Cooperative along with some other fellas, but he really was the outreach out in the county that kind of assuaged those fears, and we know now today that was a great thing that he did. A.V. Miller kept on, developed a lot of things through 4-H, formed a lot of the 4-H clubs that exist even still today, really affected many aspects of our life here in Richland County. We do owe him a debt of gratitude. That is why we have the A.V. Miller building, and now that's why we call it that. So I hope you all learned something from this. Don't forget Center Color Fest coming up in basically a week and a half. So you need to register your displays so then we can judge them and we can win valuable prizes as well. Just go to richlandcentertourism.com, look for the Center Color Fest tab at the top. Just hit that link and then you'll get all the information you need. Again, I'm Marty Richards, Richland Center Tourism. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.